They called it the heist of the century. $4.5 billion vanished from a sovereign wealth fund. A sovereign wealth fund is supposed to be boring. It invests national savings into safe assets and funds long-horizon projects. In Malaysia, One Malaysia Development Berhad, 1MDB, was pitched as exactly that, a state-backed engine for power plants, new financial districts, and foreign partnerships. On paper, the governance looked respectable, with a board, external auditors, and global banks in the mix. In practice, 1MDB sat at the fault line where politics, prestige projects, and opaque finance meet. In that space, complexity became a cloak and urgency a shield. The stakes were national and global. Domestically, 1MDB raised money in the name of development, which tied its reputation to the government and made skepticism politically costly. Internationally, the fund tapped dollar markets, hired marquee bankers, and moved cash through Singapore, Switzerland, and the Caribbean, pulling multiple legal systems into play. When a sovereign-linked fund borrows at speed across borders, every weak control, from sloppy audit trails to hero worship of rainmaker bankers, turns from nuisance into opening. The cast was wide and uneven in power. Inside Malaysia, 1MDB's board and management held formal responsibility for investment approvals and counterparty selection. Above them, senior political figures set the mandate, shaped appointments, and controlled narrative. In the orbit of the fund, a well-connected operator, Low Tak Joe, widely known as Joe Low, became the most controversial fixer, described by US prosecutors as a driving force behind the flows. He has denied wrongdoing. In the private sector, a major US investment bank underwrote 3 large bond offerings for 1MDB, with its Asia dealmakers later accused by authorities of flouting internal controls. Gatekeepers formed the chorus. Auditors who signed off, private bankers who moved money, compliance teams who asked questions or looked away, and offshore service providers who built a maze of shells. The timeline reads like a fuse burning toward an inevitable flash. In 2009, 1MDB took shape with a development mission and eye-catching joint ventures. In 2012 and 2013, the US bank arranged bond issues tied to an energy strategy at unusual speed and with exceptionally rich fees. By 2015, investigative reporting connected 1MDB to luxury assets and Hollywood financing, while opposition lawmakers demanded answers at home. In 2016, the US Department of Justice filed sweeping civil forfeiture complaints, alleging that billions were diverted through offshore vehicles and private accounts. In the same period, Singaporean and Swiss supervisors penalized financial institutions for anti-money laundering lapses tied to 1MDB flows. In 2018, after a change in Malaysia's government, investigators accelerated domestic probes and filed criminal charges. In 2020, US prosecutors announced a resolution with the US parent of the bank that underwrote the bonds. While its Malaysian subsidiary entered a guilty plea, Malaysia separately announced a multi-billion-dollar settlement with the bank. In July 2020, a Malaysian court delivered a landmark conviction in the SRC International matter, a case closely linked to 1MDB. That is where we stop. The record through the end of 2020, as cases and asset recoveries continued. Mechanically, the alleged scheme was straightforward and repeatable. 1MDB announced joint ventures with counterparties that sounded official and near sovereign, especially in the Gulf. To finance these ventures, the fund issued bonds and raised loans that generated a torrent of cash. Proceeds were sent to special purpose vehicles, with names designed to imply affiliation with a respected Abu Dhabi institution, when, prosecutors said, there was no such tie. From those vehicles, funds were layered across accounts in Singapore, Switzerland, and the Caribbean, then converted into assets unrelated to public development. US filings described sham options, falsified justifications, and backdated agreements that created an illusion of risk management. Internal messages, reproduced in court papers, depicted bankers hustling to close deals, while compliance warnings were softened or bypassed. The pattern was classic. Raise, layer, spend, launder, conceal. Follow the money and the incentives glow like runway lights. Inside the fund, national interest became a trump card that allowed massive transfers to outrun project reality. For dealmakers, the bonds delivered extraordinary underwriting economics and bragging rights in Asia's sovereign market. Across the three issues, public reporting and later filings placed total fees at levels that sovereigns almost never pay for commoditized debt. For intermediaries, each hop, incorporation, escrow, swap, advisory, generated another invoice. Private bankers competed for deposits and flows that spun off from the deals. Art dealers, real estate brokers, and luxury concierges benefited downstream as money sought quiet or glamour. Prosecutors later alleged that officials and associates enjoyed the fruits, penthouses, paintings, jewelry, and film financing. The beneficiaries had seats at the table. The public did not. Controls did not simply miss, they bent. Within the bank, compliance teams raised red flags. Senior coverage bankers vouched for the client and promised comfort. When a British Virgin Islands affiliate triggered questions, someone supplied a letter with grand letterhead and ambiguous phrasing, which combined with deal urgency, proved enough to move forward. Inside 1MDB, board approvals were recorded after brief presentations, heavy on aspiration and light on detail about counterparty risk. Auditors rotated. When documentation demands stiffened, replacements arrived. Across global banks, AML teams sometimes did catch anomalies, but alerts were deflected with references to sovereign confidentiality or time-sensitive opportunities. In secrecy jurisdictions, beneficial ownership checks became box-ticking. Elsewhere, suspicious transaction reports were filed late, by which time the flows had moved on. Enforcement arrived as a chorus, each agency singing in its own register. In the United States, the Department of Justice launched civil forfeiture suits to seize assets allegedly traceable to 1MDB funds, from penthouses and paintings to a yacht. Those actions evolved into criminal charges against individuals and, in 2020, a deferred prosecution agreement with the U.S. parent of the underwriting bank, while its Malaysian unit pleaded guilty to violations tied to the scheme. In Singapore, the Monetary Authority sanctioned multiple banks, shuttered 2 private banks, and secured jail terms for several bankers over AML breaches. In Switzerland, the financial supervisor reprimanded institutions for serious compliance failures in their handling of politically exposed clients and complex cross-border transfers. In Malaysia, investigators charged former officials, reopened files, and pushed cases tied to 1MDB and SRC International through the courts. In the United Kingdom and the Middle East, mutual legal assistance enabled freezes and forfeitures. Each action spoke the same message. The gatekeepers had been asleep, and the wake-up was expensive. Victims in white-collar cases are easy to abstract, but the damage here was real. Money earmarked for public projects did not land where promised. The government shouldered heavy debts and guarantees. Projects were delayed or repriced, budget space for social priorities shrank, and the national brand absorbed reputational bruises that make foreign capital more expensive. Ordinary citizens paid through opportunity costs that never appear in a headline number. Private banking reputations suffered, and regulators used the affair to ratchet up expectations for source of wealth verification, enhanced due diligence for sovereign-linked clients, and a hard skepticism toward complex structures draped in national interest. The warning signs were visible to anyone willing to ignore the spin. Velocity was wrong. Funds raised and moved faster than concrete could be poured. Opacity was wrong. Counterparties with official-sounding names were domiciled in secrecy havens, and money pinged between booking centers without a credible commercial story. Economics were wrong. Sovereigns do not pay private equity-style fees for plain vanilla underwriting. Governance was wrong, auditors rotated under pressure, and committees invoked urgency to override procedure. Lifestyle was wrong. When people orbiting a public fund suddenly acquire yachts and penthouses, skepticism should harden into investigation. None of these signals alone proves criminal intent. Together, they map a pattern that compliance teams, investors, and journalists should treat as a siren. There are lessons for anyone structuring cross-border capital with political proximity. Treat the word sovereign as a risk factor, not a comfort blanket. Force a transparent pipeline that ties funding to project milestones, and stop raising when cash outpaces build. Map counterparties to beneficial owners and documentary proof. If a vehicle's name mimics a famous institution, Insist on direct confirmation from principals, not intermediaries. Tie fees to market norms and explain deviations to an independent committee. Give second-line functions real veto power. If compliance says the structure smells wrong, the deal rests until the smell is gone. Read lifestyle as data. Sudden wealth among politically exposed persons tied to your transaction is not gossip, it is a control failure. Jurisdictions matter because they define the levers. In the United States, the Department of Justice and the Securities and Exchange Commission assert reach through dollar clearing and market access. If your wires touch U.S. correspondent banks or your bonds sell to U.S. investors, you are inside the perimeter. In Malaysia, criminal statutes on corruption and public fund governance put 1MDB and its affiliates squarely within domestic jurisdiction, with the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission and the Attorney General's chambers leading investigations and prosecutions. In Singapore, the monetary authority sets a high bar for anti-money laundering and enforces it with bans and fines. In Switzerland, FINMA's expectations for private banks handling high-risk clients shaped a series of reprimands. These authorities read each other's filings and cooperate through mutual assistance. If you structure a complex sovereign-linked deal, assume that all of them will eventually read your emails. To the end of 2020, accountability solidified. U.S. forfeiture cases translated into asset returns to Malaysia via structures meant to benefit the public, not political actors. The underwriting bank accepted a multi-jurisdictional settlement that combined a U.S. deferred prosecution agreement, a guilty plea by its Malaysian subsidiary, and compliance undertakings. Malaysian courts advanced prosecutions with the July 2020 SRC judgment, signaling that domestic law would not defer to international headlines. Singapore and Switzerland continued to ban bankers and sanction institutions. None of this undoes the harm, but it does shift incentives. Future gatekeepers know that strategic is not a control, and glossy letters are not beneficial ownership data. If you run money, sit on a board, or advise clients, keep a simple mental model. Match funding size to project cadence, not prestige. Demand purposes for every special purpose vehicle that you can explain aloud in plain English. Require that fees trace to work product and market realities. Build monitoring that flags speed, circularity, and unrelated end uses. Train teams to see social cues, celebrity proximity, secrecy, sudden wealth, as risk signals, not gossip. Write exit ramps into mandates and be willing to use them. If this helped you understand how the 1MDB story actually moved money, consider subscribing and sharing the channel with someone who follows global finance and wants the mechanics, not the myths.